Now, I encourage everybody to go watch one of these videos because they almost have no, how can I put this, stake in the fight. I believe, at least, right? If they do, they have the least stake in the fight. Media is an important thing. It's an important communication to the masses out there. But this video was 9 years ago. 9 years ago, the Israel and Palestine conflict was explained in this video, which I've watched before a couple of times years ago. Sometimes I forget the specifics of what exactly took place. But I always try to encourage other people to just watch these videos just so they can understand exactly what went down and how it came to be. Because it's kind of crazy how the angle has been October 9th. Is it the October 9th or incident or something like that? The angle that people choose to use, in terms of like what happened between Israel, and that's they literally choose to believe that's how it all started. That's how this whole conflict started, when it goes back years and years ago. Even this video was like 9 years ago, explaining how long this conflict was. So even 9 years ago, it was still what's this? The conflict has been going on for years, even 9 years ago, that somebody had to make a video about it and explain the whole conflict. And it got 26 million views. I'm not sure how many views it had before this whole thing became popular now, but I bet you it wasn't as much as 26 million views, meaning that there might have been a rise of viewership as soon as this thing became headlines. So right now I'm gonna be part of the 26 million people that watch it again, for the sake of this video, so for the sake of us understanding what's going on, because it's never black and white. It never really is. All right, let's go.
One of the biggest myths about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that it's been going on for centuries, all about ancient religious hatreds. In fact, while religion is involved, conflict's mostly about two groups of people who claim the same land, and it really only goes back about a century to the early 1900s.
Still a long time ago.
The region along the eastern Mediterranean we now call Israel-Palestine, been under Ottoman rule for centuries, was religiously diverse, including mostly Muslims and Christians, also a small number of Jews who lived generally in peace. It was changing in two important ways. First, more people in the region were developing a sense of being not just ethnic Arabs, but Palestinians, a distinct national identity. At the same time, not so far away in Europe, more Jews were joining a movement called Zionism, which said that Judaism was not just a religion, but a nationality, one that deserved a nation of its own. And after centuries of persecution, many believed a Jewish state was their only way of safety and saw their historic homeland in the Middle East as their best hope for establishing it. In the first decades of the 20th century, tens of thousands of European Jews moved there. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and British and French empires carved up the Middle East, the British taking control of a region it called the British Mandate for Palestine. At first, the British allowed Jewish immigration, but as more Jews arrived, settling into farming communities, tension between Jews and Arabs grew. Both sides committed acts of violence, and by the 1930s, the British began limiting Jewish immigration. In response, Jewish militias formed to fight both the local Arabs and to resist British rule. Then came the Holocaust, leading many more Jews to flee Europe for British Palestine and galvanizing much of the world in support of a Jewish state. In 1947, as sectarian violence between Jews and Arabs there grew, the United Nations approved a plan to divide British Palestine into two separate states. One for Jews, Israel, and one for Arabs, Palestine. The city of Jerusalem, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians all have holy sites, was to become a special international zone. The plan was meant to give Jews a state, to establish Palestinian independence, and to end the sectarian violence that the British could no longer control. The Jews accepted the plan, and they declared independence as Israel. But Arabs throughout the region saw the UN plan as just more European colonialism trying to steal their land.
Yeah.
Many of the Arab states, who had just recently won independence themselves, declared war on Israel in an effort to establish a unified Arab Palestine where all of British Palestine had been.
was.
The new state of Israel won the war, but in the process, they pushed well past their borders under the UN plan, taking the western half of Jerusalem and much of the land that was to have been part of Palestine. They also expelled huge numbers of Palestinians from their homes, creating a massive refugee population whose descendants today number about 7 million.
That was it back in 1948. That was back in 1948. So the same thing going on right now has been going on since 1948. I just want to point that out.
At the end of the war, Israel controlled all of the territory except for Gaza, which Egypt controlled, and the West Bank, named because it's west of the Jordan River, which Jordan controlled. This was the beginning of the decades-long Arab-Israeli conflict. During this period, many Jews in Arab-majority countries fled or were expelled, arriving in Israel. Then something happened that transformed the conflict. In 1967, Israel and the neighboring Arab states fought another war.
Six-Day War?
When it ended, Israel had seized the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, and both Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Israel was now occupying the Palestinian territories, including all of Jerusalem and its holy sites. This left Israel responsible for governing the Palestinians, a people it had fought for decades. In 1978, Israel and Egypt signed the U.S.-brokered Camp David Accords. Shortly after that, Israel gave Sinai back to Egypt as part of the peace treaty. At the time, this was hugely controversial in the Arab world. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated in part because of outrage against it.
Okay.
But it marked the beginning of the end of the wider Arab-Israeli conflict. Over the next few decades, the other Arab states gradually made peace with Israel, even if they never signed formal peace treaties. But Israel's military was still occupying the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza, and this is when the conflict became an Israeli-Palestinian struggle. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, which had formed in the 1960s to seek a Palestinian state, fought against Israel, including through acts of terrorism. Initially, the PLO claimed all of what had been British Palestine, meaning it wanted to end the state of Israel entirely. Fighting between Israel and the PLO went on for years, even including a 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon to kick the group out of Beirut.
The stillness of the ceasefire in southern Lebanon was shattered today by the sound of guns, bombs, and planes.
Now, the PLO later said it would accept dividing the land between Israel and Palestine, but the conflict continued. As all of this was happening, something dramatic was changing in the Israel-occupied Palestinian territories. Israelis were moving in. These people are called settlers, and they made their homes in the West Bank and Gaza, whether Palestinians wanted them or not. Some moved for religious reasons, some because they want to claim the land for Israel, some just because the housing is cheap, often subsidized by the Israeli government. Some settlements are cities with thousands of people, others are small communities deep into the West Bank.
If you've always felt a deep yearning for Jerusalem, now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only to stand within its gates, but also to build the home of your dreams there.
Settlers are followed by soldiers to guard them, and the growing settlements force Palestinians off of their land and divide communities. Short term, they make the occupation much more painful for Palestinians. Long term, by dividing up Palestinian land, they make it much more difficult for the Palestinians to ever have an independent state.
Now, this is one of the things I saw. Initially, when this whole thing was being televised, or social media, when it was popping on social media just a couple of years ago, is that one of the clips I saw was of people, Israeli people, kicking out Palestinians, and then they ask them, why would you do that? And they're like, no, this is our land, this is our place. And they felt entitled to that. They were like, no, that's why they're doing it. That's why they're kicking them out. That's one of the first clips I've seen before we ever saw the extreme, clips that that were all over social media, where now things have turned to violence. Palestinians are being killed all over the place. But yeah, this has been going on for a very, very long time, and Palestinians have been on the losing end for a very, very long time. Now, they also said that you would ask yourself, like, why wouldn't they just leave? Better way to survive is to just leave. Why didn't they leave all those years ago? Now, he claimed that part of the reason why they're fighting over this land is for religious reasons. It's part of the reason, at least. I feel like it's the biggest reason why they're fighting over this land. Both sides, really. There's no way anyone would fight this hard for. Maybe people should really, fight for their own land this hard, But I believe at the same time that people would prioritize survival over, land. So I believe people would move if there was a conflict going on in their own homes, But for some reason, people don't want to leave here, and people are willing to kill to take over the land. So they're willing to go to war for it. So yeah, religion has I believe that's one of a few things. Faith is one of a few things that can only, compromise the mind to the extent where you actually do things for the sake of your things like this for the sake of your faith. I'm not quite educated on the religious, aspect of Israel and Palestine, of the land of Jerusalem, but I know enough for me to believe that, okay, they're willing to go to the extreme lengths for this thing. They have a whole history behind it. There's the Bible is one of the many things that, show us the history a little bit of, Jerusalem. So, yeah, I believe that's part of the reason why. Faith is strong enough to make people do the most insane thing. I don't want to swear, the most insane shit out there, but yeah, I swore. Never mind.
Today, there are several 100,000 settlers in occupied territory, even though the international community considers them illegal. By the late 1980s, Palestinian frustration exploded into the Intifada, which is the Arabic word for uprising.
Yeah.
It began with mostly protests and boycotts, but soon became violent. Israel responded with heavy force.
Yeah.
A couple hundred Israelis, over 1,000 Palestinians died in the first Intifada.
Wow. So there was a conflict where the Intifada was happening. Thousands of Palestinians died while hundreds of Israelis died. Doesn't that sound familiar? It's like Israeli just got it. Oh my God, I don't want to. Okay, let me just shut up. They can't help themselves.
Around the same time, a group of Palestinians in Gaza, who considered the PLO too secular, too compromise-minded, created Hamas, a violent extremist group dedicated to Israel's destruction. By the early 1990s, it's clear that Israelis and Palestinians have to make peace. The leaders from both sides signed the Oslo Accords. This is meant to be the big first step toward Israel
Didn't
maybe
mean
someday
anything.
withdrawing from the Palestinian territories and allowing an independent Palestine. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority, allowing Palestinians a little bit of freedom to govern themselves in certain areas. Hardliners on both sides opposed the Oslo Accords.
Yeah.
Members of Hamas launched suicide bombings to try to sabotage the process.
Mm-hmm.
The Israeli right protests peace talks with ralliers calling Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin a traitor and a Nazi. Not long after Rabin signs the second round of Oslo Accords, a far-right Israeli shoots him to death in Tel Aviv.
Jeez, man.
This violence showed how extremists on both sides can use violence to derail peace, keep a permanent conflict going as they seek the other side's total destruction.
Exactly.
That's a dynamic that's been around ever since. Negotiations meant to hammer out the final details on peace drag on for years, and a big Camp David summit in 2000 comes up empty. Palestinians come to believe peace isn't coming, rise up in a second Intifada, this one much more violent than the first.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it wound down a few years later, about 1,000 Israelis and 3,200 Palestinians had died.
Yeah.
The second Intifada really changes the conflict. Israelis become much more skeptical that Palestinians will ever accept peace or that it's even worth trying. Israeli politics shift right, the country builds walls and checkpoints to control Palestinians' movements. They're not really trying to solve the conflict anymore, just manage it. The Palestinians are left feeling like negotiating didn't work, and violence didn't work, and that they're stuck under an ever-growing occupation with no future as a people. That year, Israel withdraws from Gaza. Hamas gains power, but splits from the Palestinian Authority in a short civil war, dividing Gaza from the West Bank. Israel puts Gaza under a suffocating blockade, and unemployment rises to 40%. This is the state of the conflict as we know it today. It's relatively new, and it's unbearable for Palestinians. In the West Bank, more and more settlements are smothering Palestinians, often respond with protests and sometimes with violence, though most just want normal lives. In Gaza, Hamas and other violent groups have periodic wars with Israel. The fighting overwhelmingly kills Palestinians, including lots of civilians. In Israel itself, most people have become apathetic. For the most part, the occupation keeps the conflict relatively removed from their daily lives, with moments of brief but horrible violence. There's little political will for peace. No one really knows where the conflict goes from here. Maybe a third intifada, maybe the Palestinian Authority collapses. But everyone agrees that things as they are now can't last much longer. Israel's occupation of the Palestinians is too unstable to last, and that unless something dramatic changes, whatever comes next will be much worse.
Yeah. It's called genocide. That's what it's called. That's what's coming. It's very important for us to know the history behind these things, man, because you can be lost in the sauce. You can be lost in people's arguments today. There's so many people shouting so many things today that no one ever just like, let's just read the history. There's so many people who are actually involved in these things. They have families involved in these lands, and they know that their families are suffering the consequences. They know that their blood is suffering on their land, and they try to explain the situation to other people, but they also come across as very, very extremist. But that's only because they're involved in it, and I feel like it's important for the people who have no stake in the fight to learn about it and not try to pick a side or draw information from people who actually have a stake in the fight themselves. So in as much as I sympathize with a lot of people who who are suffering from this, who explain the situation from their perspective, I also have to listen to the other side. But better yet, I have to listen to the people who are looking in from hindsight and who did the proper research to find out exactly what's going on and how far it goes back and what started it all or what triggered this or that in between the current scenario as we speak. And one of the most sickening things I've seen, never mind seen, heard, is the lies that come out of people's mouths, really, when it comes to this situation. We've seen the videos of people dying, and yet you have people justifying this thing. You have a lot of social media influencers. I wouldn't even call them influencers. I would call them political influencers, I guess. Social media political influencers. They literally just lie. Granted, the social media that we use most of the time is mostly American based, so of course we're gonna see mostly American content. But YouTube works in a sense that whatever you watch pops up on your feed mostly, and if you're not logged in or or you're a first time user of YouTube, it's gonna show you things from your own native land, from around you, that might be popular to you, that you might know. But the biggest content that YouTube ever pushes out there has to be mostly American content, and that's how I somewhat know about these things. I hear what they have to say, I watch what they talk about, I watch what they do, and I hear the lies. I hear the truth, I hear the lies, I hear the conflict, I hear the politics, I hear everything that they talk about, and it sickens me sometimes, and they're not unique, they're not special or anything like that. You come to any country, you can see that there's different kinds of conflicts going on, different kinds of conversations going on, sides. There's always some sides, but because there's always sides, it's like you gotta source it out and then just hear the truth from every single scenario out there. It's like everybody just prioritizes picking a side instead of actually sticking to the truth. It's because everybody has an agenda, everybody has an angle, everybody has a goal, really, and it's all about benefiting themselves and not others. So it's super important to just know about these things. I'm not even a person who reads a lot or who watches a lot of politics. I'm actually avoiding politics right now. And but it's like, damn, when you hear something like this, you're like, damn, what's going on? And you're like, well, let me do some research, let me read up, or let me listen to somebody who may know better than I do. Or what if that person has a stake in the fight? What if that person is choosing to speak on? Well, that's exactly why I watched this video multiple times, because throughout this whole entire video, I'm seeing somebody pointing out information, pointing out facts, not picking a side, just telling us what happened, not saying that this is evil or that is evil. They're just telling us what it is, bro. They're just telling us what it is. They don't even know the whole entire information. So they're like, because it doesn't go, what we have, information that we have doesn't go extremely far back, or is not really extremely detailed. So it's like, let's just see what we have right now, information that we have right now, and then dish it out the way it is. And that's exactly what they did. Of course, this is a 10-minute video. It does not explain the entire situation. It does not go into proper detail. It just gives us an overview of exactly what happened as far as they have gone back. So if you want to research more about this, I do fully encourage you to just do your research, watch more videos. There's probably way more videos that explain the entire situation. And going back to the whole religious thing, there's even reasons there. There's even information you can pick up from that, just to give you a glimpse of how far this whole thing goes back, and how the perspective is really from a faith perspective, which I do fully believe that. Ironically enough, I believe that the biggest reason that this whole war is going on, civil war is going on, is because of religious reasons. But yeah, that's just me. I may be wrong, I may be right, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, also, sometimes it's really just as simple as people fighting over their home. Imagine someone coming in and just taking over your house. Really, like, imagine someone just doing that. In South Africa, we had our own version of apartheid. We have our own version of civil war going on here. We had it, and we still suffering from its remnants. And we still have things that are derailing us from ever moving on from that. And I would never ever wish that upon anyone to, I would never wish for anyone to feel, to have that feeling. Although sometimes oh god, yeah, it's crazy. It's just insane. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I'll link the video down in the description if you've watched up until this point. This is my only favorite video I like to watch, by the way. There's also the Russian one where it talks about Vladimir Putin, goes deep into that history too, and if you want to watch more of this deep dive with me, please do hit that like and subscribe button, just to let me know that you want to watch this, so that we can both learn what exactly is going on in the world that we live in today. Politics, I don't like politics. I don't. But information, that's something that's very useful to me. And I believe it's gonna be useful to you too. So let's learn together. And this is enforced, by the way. Unlike school, I hate school. I don't like education sometimes.